Welcome to SpunTales.com, where we spin tales from around the web. This episode, we continue the story, The Falling, by J.D. Phillips. An advanced copy of The Falling was provided to SpunTales.com with permission to read on air. Be sure to follow her at her socials at Facebook.com/AuthorJD and Twitter.com/JD_author. He kept his eyes down, refusing to gaze upon his reflection even as every ounce of him desired to do exactly that. He resisted for a few solid seconds, but then, for some reason he couldn't quite fathom, his eyes moved upward seemingly on their own volition. The face in the mirror matched his in every way except it was smiling. The reflection's head tilted downward, dark eyes turned up to meet his directly. Mouth opened into a sharp, toothy smile that made him shiver in a way that even the cold in the cubes downstairs never had. The face was his, but not his. Across from him, but certainly not a reflection of his own. It didn't make the slightest bit of sense. He wanted to call out to Randy and ask if he saw the same, but he wasn't quite sure if he wanted to know the answer. For Randy to confirm that there was indeed another him leering out of the mirror, or to hear he was simply seeing something that no one else could. Which would be worse? He released an odd yelp as both of the sinks before him suddenly clicked on and began pouring water out full blast. He blinked and looked at the sinks for only a split second, but that was evidently enough. When he reluctantly glanced up at the mirror once more, he found only his sickly, rattled self staring back at him. "You alright?" he heard Randall ask. He had knew Randall had spoken to him, and that he ought to give some response, but he wasn't sure how to answer the question. He was also afraid that he might see his reflection respond in a different way, and if that happened... "Earth to Carhartt," Andy said, snapping his fingers in front of Carhartt's face. "Where'd you go?" Just like that, Randall was between him and the reflection, and the sink shut off with a click. His pulse slowly relaxed. The feeling of being watched vanished, almost instantly. They were alone here. He was alone. "I was here," he heard himself say, his voice nearly as soft as a whisper. "Yeah, I know, Never mind. Rita's gonna clean you up real quick while I step out to get a cigarette." "Out? You're going?" "I'm still on the clock, you know, but Ben's on his own down there making God only knows what sort of mess, and I've got a shit ton to do before I'm gone." "Gone?" Randy half rolled his eyes. "We should have called you Parrot," he murmured. Carhartt furrowed his brow. "Don't give me that look either," Randy was quick to say. "Just do what they ask and get the test done so they can help you out, yeah? I don't want to see you in my morgue again." The furrowed brow remained. "That's a good thing," Randy added. "I don't want to see you dead." "Oh, okay," Carhartt replied. "I actually could use your help. A few minutes longer if you can stay," Rita said, tossing out a professional smile. "I'm sure he could use some help too. Wouldn't want him to fall and hit his head again, would we?" Randall sighed wearily. "Pretty sure he'd be a vegetable if he did," he replied. "Fine. Hand me some gloves." Rita gave Randall a pair of gloves and put a pair herself on before she ran a towel underneath one of the faucets. Carhartt could see now that the water was made to turn on and off whenever something moved in front of the faucet sensors, which made what happened earlier even more curious. Rita let out a frustrated laugh as the faucet she used kept running well after she'd wrung out the extra water from the towel and shook her head. I swear, these stupid things never work right. There have been a lot of lights flickering tonight too. Weird sort of night all around, yeah? Randall replied, only half listening. Tell me when you're ready. Anytime, Rita said. So long as he feels comfortable, of course. We don't want to aggravate any possible injuries. You good? Randy asked. Carhartt wasn't sure good was the right word for it, but not at all the same. He braced himself as Randy moved forward to help lift him up out of the chair for a fresh wave of stabbing pains and images, but the pain never came. Between the gloves and Randall's jacket, his skin never made contact with Carhartt's. Rita worked quickly to wipe down all traces of spilled chocolate, while she also surveyed Carhartt's skin for any obvious signs of injury. She'd thought when she'd seen Dunrow's notes that Dunrow simply hadn't finished charting before her sudden illness, to only make mention of a head wound. But she could see now there wasn't much else to take note of. Incredibly, there was nothing remarkable about the man's skin aside from 2 parallel marks upon his back. As for the marks, Rita honestly hadn't seen anything like them before. They were much too red to be ordinary bruises and also far too smooth to see the result of any branding or burns. The exact shape was difficult to place, but both marks were identical and would form some kind of heart if you were able to push them side by side. Seems you should have went with Hart instead of Carhartt, she said, reaching for a dry towel. Are those some new type of tattoo or something? I'm going to go out on a limb and guess he doesn't know what you're talking about, Randall replied. They almost look like burns, Rita said. Do they hurt? Carhartt looked up briefly at Randall for some sign of how he ought to answer, but Randall had been too overwhelmed to notice the marks before he placed his jacket over Carhartt's shoulders, and therefore had no opinion on whether they should be painful or not. I don't know, he said. Rita hid her confusion as she quickly dried him off and moved to fetch an ugly green hospital gown from the counter. Randy, too curious for his own good, turned Carhartt around just enough to view the marks Rita had mentioned in the mirror. They did look odd, like a nearly raw flesh after a scab was torn off of a healing wound a touch too soon. But it was far deeper than the top layer of skin. They also, just as she said, would form some sort of heart if they pushed together. You're not wrong about the heart thing. Or the weird thing, Randy said. Heart on Carhartt. Huh. Heart. Carhartt whispered. Feels right to you, does it? Randy asked. Carhartt, now Hart, liked the sound of that, though it gnawed at him. Everyone had seen the marks on his back except for him. He put his arms through the holes of the gown Rita held out before him. This fabric was the most abrasive yet, and he turned his head as best as he could to steal a glance at his back in the mirror before Rita could secure the garment. Strained though his vision was, it only took a few seconds to figure out he didn't see the marks the same way Randall and Rita had. While he understood they might mistake the splotches as 2 halves of a broken heart, he simply saw the remnants of a burning red that scorched him during the storm. Fire. They made him think of fire, and suddenly, he felt as though he was falling over again. Burns, he said, turning away from the mirror so abruptly he lost his balance and fell against Randy. Randy caught him by reflex, pulling him closer to steady him before his knees gave out completely. Randy's actions had saved Hart a nasty fall against the counter, but also caused a gap to form between the edge of his glove and the jacket sleeve, just wide enough to allow his skin and Carhartt's to touch. The contact was brief, but no less intense as ripples of needling pain and images and emotions flooded Hart's system, just as they had done with Dunrow earlier. Except Randall's emotional scale slid the opposite order from the doctor's in that he had started from a much better place. He'd been happy once, content. The dark clouds hadn't rolled in until he was an adult. Not until he had to hold someone else as he was holding Carhartt now and care for them and eventually let them go. Once they were gone, the days grew long and empty. The loss of duty, identity, they were so strong, so overwhelming. He turned to the dead to cope because he felt he had more in common with the corpses than living human beings. Also, it's because he wanted to join them. God damn it! He heard Randall shout in his ear. Seconds later, Randy released him and he found himself falling all over again. Fortunately, Rita had time to get the clean wheelchair in place, so he landed on the seat with an awkward plop and sigh. The needling pain was gone. His back no longer burned. "You did right by him, Rand," he said. It was what he wanted. He was just as relieved as, "Don't," Randy was quick to say, his voice far more gruff than Hurt had ever heard it before. "I don't know what you are or what you think you know, but do not. You know what? I gotta go." "Will you be back?" Hart asked. Randy laughed flatly and shook his head. "Yeah, that's gonna be a hard no." Hart frowned and watched as Randy ripped off the gloves and frantically washed his hands, still laughing flat even as his face remained set in a scowl, before he turned sharply and headed out the bathroom door. "Randy, just don't take Turner Road on your way home, okay?" He was certain that Randall had heard him despite his lack of response. You just listened to The Falling by J.D. Phillips. Be sure to follow us at facebook.com/SpunTales and twitter.com/SpunTales. SpunTales is a Heathen Digital podcast. If you'd like your podcast read through the Heathen Digital Network, contact us at info@heathendigital.com or visit our website, heathendigital.com. If you're an author and you'd like your story read on air, contact us at info@spuntales.com. Thanks for listening.